Welcome to the Instant Impact Podcast. I have to tell you, my conversation today that you're about to hear literally gave me goosebumps. It was so powerful, so thought-provoking. And if you're at a place in your life right now where you are feeling called to do something bigger, to show up in a bigger way, maybe you've been, there's so many ways this could be showing up for you. Maybe in your work, you haven't been playing full out, or maybe you've been saying yes to things that you actually really want to say no to, or maybe you are, I know for many of us, we're feeling called to be more visible, step up in a more visible way, but there's fear that shows up and there's discomfort that shows up. And it can be the fear of taking up space and making other people uncomfortable. It can be the fear of judgment or criticism. You have to listen to today's episode. So let me tell you a little bit about my guest expert today. She is my friend, Tallia Deljou, and Tallia and I have done work together off and on for years. I've been a client of hers. She's been a client of mine. She's become just a personal friend over the years as well. And she's brilliant at what she does. And I think you'll understand very quickly why I love this woman. So I'm going to share just a little bit about her with you, and then I'll let you know some of what you can look forward to. So Tallia is a positive psychology expert and a transformational coach. And she's really focused on helping her clients do the deep inner work so that they can live in alignment with what actually matters to them. Stop worrying about what other people think. Stop worrying about trying to please and change who we are to make other people like us more, and to really live out fully who we are and why we were put on this earth. This woman is an international speaker. She's spoken on stages next to people like Deepak Chopra and Jen Sincero and Adam Grant. Just incredible, brilliant insight. She's got a strong background in positive psychology as well. So you'll hear some of that come out in our conversation today. And some of my favorite parts that we talked about that I think you'll really, really enjoy are, first, big question: how do we find our purpose? That is, I think, at the end of the day, the question so many of us may still be asking ourselves, especially maybe you're at a crossroads, maybe you're doing something new, and you may have felt like you had purpose in where you were before, what you were doing before, but maybe there's this next mountain that you want to climb, or this shift happening in your life, and you're looking at, what's my purpose next? Well, Tallia is going to help you find that out. We also talk about how to release the fear of judgment as you step up and play a bigger game. And this one is huge. This has been, just sharing candidly for myself, like something that's come up over the years, and something that I'm not perfect with today. I think I've learned a lot about how to release it, and much better than I was, but it still shows up for me. And so she gives some incredible pointers there. And then two, for all my achievers out there, I know who you are. I am one of you. And sometimes we can find ourselves just doing for the sake of doing. And Tallia shared some really great insights on how to take aligned action that's actually going to move you forward in support of your goals and being more of who you are, rather than taking action based on people pleasing and shoulds. And that one really, really stuck with me. So there's so many goodies for you in this episode. And Tallia has a bunch of ways you can connect with her that she shares at the end. And I know you're going to just really, really enjoy getting to know her and learn from her and hear her heart. So excited to bring you my very special guest on the podcast today, Tallia Deljou. Mm-hmm. Tallia, I am just so honored and so grateful to have you on this show. Anytime I get to spend time with you is so much fun. And selfishly, this episode it's for everyone listening, but it's also really for me, because I feel like I learn so much from you every single time I talk to you. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for opening up the space to have these conversations. And I love seeing you and being reconnected with you. So I can't wait to see what comes up today.
Oh my gosh. Well, there's so much. And I think the interesting thing is, just at the time we're recording this, it's June 2020, and there's so much that's been happening in the world the past couple of months, and so many shifts. And so, as I was thinking ahead of time for our interview, I was thinking, gosh, there are so many directions we could go with this, because I think your message and what you help people with is so relevant for what's going on right now. But one of the things that I think happens a lot for for my listeners, as they're growing their brand and their visibility, is there can be so much fear that shows up as we work to become more visible and as we put ourselves out there. And it can be the fear of judgment. It can also be the fear of taking up too much space and like, who are we to show up in this way? And so I know you're going to help everybody who might be struggling with that, or even just with really getting back in touch with what really matters to them right now. So for anyone who's not familiar with you, I mean, I talked in the intro about who you are and just the incredible person you are and the things that you've done, but share with us about your journey that's gotten you to this point. I know now you do a lot of transformational work specifically for women. Why is this something you're passionate about, and what's the journey been that's gotten you here?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. I've been talking a lot in my work recently about power and purpose and how to really figure out what that thing is going to be for you. And for some people, there is a very clear thing. For others, there isn't. And there's a lot we can talk about there. But for me, what's really gotten me into this work is what I call a hole in the heart. So this is a beautiful theory in the world of positive psychology where if we're able to look back on what's caused us the most pain, on the problems that we've either faced or we've watched people close to us face, or any kind of like preoccupation we've just been more sensitive to growing up, might signal to us what's called the hole in the heart, right? Which is, again, this sense that there's something, some pain, problem, preoccupation that you face that you want to help other people solve. And by tending to the hole in their hearts, you're also tending to the hole in your own heart. And I love this. And for me, the hole in the heart was always watching my mom grow up. As I grew up, watching my mom really struggle with her sense of self and identity and worth and value, and how for so many people, we look to the outside world, to the roles, the titles, the jobs, the people we hang out with, the companies we work for, to define who we are, to give us that sense of self and worth. And I saw her just going through so many ups and downs of having those things and, loving herself, and then not having those things and not knowing who she was without it. So much of my work, because of that, is focused on helping people come back to that place within themselves that is whole, that is worthy, that is real, and that is there regardless of the title, the role, all the things outside of us, because all of that, especially in today's time, so much is changing. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much chaos and change. And if we're defining ourselves by these external things, so we're standing on shaky ground all the time. So how do we build a foundation upon which we can stand strong, even amidst change, amidst seasons that are inevitably, a season's a season, it's not forever. So that's a lot of what's shaped my work, and wanting to make sure people turn inward and look at themselves and find that sense of significance within them before looking to everybody else for a sense of who they are.
So how the heck do we do that? Because it's, as you say it makes so much sense. Yeah. And I also know that I even think about my own behavior, and that, I'll do a post, and then the kind of the benchmark for me sometimes is how many people liked it, how many people commented on it, or, what are other people going to think of this, of how I'm looking today or how I'm showing up today. So, it's funny because this is something that I became aware within the last 90 days that I was still not struggling with, but was still showing up for me. So I've got on my vision board right now, I always put things like just new mindsets I need to adapt. And so I've got up on my vision board, what other people think of me is none of my business. And so I've been really focused on that, but it can be easier said than done. So, I mean, I know you do a lot of work with clients on this. How do we start to turn inward and validate ourselves instead of looking to other people?
Totally. So it's all mindset work. You said it already, right? It's beginning to become familiar with the stories, with the thoughts, with the doubts, fears, assumptions, beliefs that have become so conditioned and automatic that we stop questioning, right? When we stop questioning, we give our power away to the judgments, to the fears, to these things that are not us, but we don't. I think for me, the work was in recognizing that I am not my thought. There's space between me and the thought, and I have power to choose what the thought is. I have power to stop and say, do I want to believe this? Is this true for me? What could be true instead, right? It's what happens is we look for evidence to prove ourselves right all the time, right? So if your belief is that people are going to judge you, you're going to find evidence of that out there. But there's also evidence of the opposite, right? So it's taking that step back and beginning to assess and become familiar with and notice and observe what those stories are, what those thoughts are. Is it true that your value is determined by, your title or your role? And it's hard. It's so hard because we've, again, been so conditioned, right? It's job descriptions become self descriptions. But if I asked you, who are you? Tell me about yourself. And I told you could not say anything about your job title, role, work. People freeze because they don't know how, they don't have the language to talk about who they are. They have the language to talk about what they do.
That's good.
So I hope that's somewhat of an answer. We could keep going with this, but it's mindset work. It's cultivating relationship to yourself and changing the way you relate to your mind and to the thoughts it creates. We have 60,000 thoughts a day, 80% of which are negative in content, 95% of which are repeated thoughts. Like you've thought them before, you probably thought it yesterday. And it's important to know that, right? It's like, this is what we're working with. It's a meaning-making machine. And the other fun statistic I always throw in here is we spend 1 out of every 8 hours on average thinking about the future, things that have not yet happened. And predicting. We think we can predict, right? Well, I'm afraid they're going to think this. No, you've already decided they're going to think that.
Yeah.
Which is why you're not doing anything.
Oh, that's so true. Gosh, it's so true. So it sounds like establishing some detachment from the thought, realizing that you are not necessarily the thought. It makes me think of this great Louise Hay affirmation card I have that says, it's only a thought and a thought can be changed. And realizing, I mean, when you share those numbers on the percentage of our thoughts that are negative and repeat, gosh, it's staggering, but it's true, right? Our brain kind of I know my brain sometimes gets caught in these loops. So then to start shifting it and to start really stepping into more of our own power and realizing that, and crafting our thoughts about what matters to us, what are some things we can be doing? Are you a fan of like journaling and affirmations, or how do you shift your thoughts when you find that they're not hurting you?
Yeah. So the first step I'd say is what I call return to a place of neutrality. So return to the facts, return to the objective facts of the circumstance that you're dealing with, that you're facing, that you're engaging with. Make it neutral. And again, recognize that what gives it meaning is the thought you then attach to it. So returning to neutrality is step one. What is the neutral objective version of what's happening before the thought, the feeling, the behavior, the result, before that kind of cycle begins? So that's step one. Step two is and the framework that I use is called it's a self-coaching model. And it's something that I learned through Brooke Castillo. And she shares that, again, everything in life is neutral. Circumstance leads to a thought, leads to a feeling, leads to an action, leads to a result. So what we think we feel, we do, what we do, we become. So that model for me has been super instrumental. And so that's another piece of it. The third piece of it is a simple question that I've already briefly thrown out, which is it true? Is it true? Could you prove it in front of a judge in court as fact, right? Or is there evidence of the opposite? And to work your way backwards through that model, right? If you don't really know what the circumstance or thought is, just look at what you're feeling. Look at the emotion. That's information, right? And if you're feeling a certain way and you're resisting that feeling, what do you want to be feeling instead? And then how do you kind of honestly create and design thoughts to cultivate that feeling? We have so much more control than we think we do, as long as we're willing to be aware and willing to see if we're not willing to do that work, nothing's going to change.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's everything. I used to dismiss the importance of it too, especially coming from a corporate background and a background. And I know you talk a lot about like action versus aligned action, which I'm kind of curious to get into with you, but
Yeah.
it was all about just the doing, do. And I totally discredited the importance of the inner work because it wasn't tactical. It wasn't something I could measure. It wasn't something I could hold on to. And over the past 7 or 8 years, like really making that shift has been transformational. And I know I'm still on the cusp of it. But it's so critical. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, because I think given the time in which we're talking, a lot of people have had more time to evaluate and to look at the circumstances in their life, whether it's a career circumstance, a relationship circumstance, a health circumstance, and to notice that there are things that are in their life that may no longer serve them. And maybe they didn't serve them for a long time, but it was easy to ignore when everything was just kind of going a million miles an hour. And if somebody is looking at a circumstance in their life and realizing, gosh, you know what, it's past time to release this. It's past time to make a change. There can be so much fear that shows up in doing that. I even think about, I don't know if you saw this, but Rachel Hollis announcing her divorce this week on Instagram. And it was like the judgment and the criticism that came in the comments was so intense. And it made me think about like how brave she had to be to share that. And, and I mean, she's getting it on a massive scale because of the brand she's built. But even for those of us who don't have that level of notoriety, it takes a certain boldness to really release what no longer serves.
Yeah.
How do we do that? How do we do that? I think there's a lot of people right now who need to know.
Yeah. Oh gosh, this is a big one. And I'm going to use a phrase or a quote that someone shared with me at one point. And he said to me, you have to be willing to become unpopular.
Ooh. Mm.
He said, know that when you commit to standing in your truth, you're going to become unpopular. Is that a risk you're willing to take?
Wow.
And I get the chills every time I say it, right? Because it points to our very conditioned desire, especially as women, to be liked, to be validated, to have everybody's approval. This is a people-pleasing conversation, right? It's I want to please everybody. I want everyone to approve, agree, like me. So that's the first thing you have to be willing to ask yourself. Like, am I willing to get uncomfortable? Am I willing to not please everybody? And a big thing I took away from Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed. Have you read it yet?
Oh my gosh, freaking amazing.
Yeah.
I made my husband Jason read it. Do you make Parsa read it?
Yeah, and he was like, I think this was written for women. I'm like, yes, and still need to read this book.
Me.
Yeah. But something I took away from her was, you're always going to be disappointing somebody.
Yeah.
Many of us choose to disappoint ourselves. Right? In wanting to please other people, we're disappointing ourselves. So it's your choice. Would you rather disappoint somebody else or yourself?
Wow.
So there's so much to unpack here, but I think it's looking at your people-pleasing tendencies and, again, the stories. Look at the thoughts, the doubts, the fears, and the assumptions that come up when you think about making that change or posting that thing or having that conversation. And talk to the fear. Like, step one with any client, I'm asking them to come to that first call having written a letter to fear. Talk like, dear fear. Dear doubt, right? Have a conversation with it. Acknowledge that it's there to tell you something. It's there to keep. Fear just wants you to be safe. Fear wants your survival and your happiness as much as you want your own survival and happiness. You want the same thing as fear wants for you. So why is it something we fight and resist and are afraid of feeling when we want the same thing?
Wow.
So that's a shift that I think is really important to make with fear, because we need it. We want it to be there. We just need to revise our relationship to it. And I think so many of us stop before we even start. Michael Jordan, one of my favorite quotes by Michael Jordan is, dang it, I'm not going to get it right, but it's something about how, like, why think of missing the shot when you haven't even taken it yet?
Ooh. Mm.
Right? Like what, and we assume, and our brains are wired for negativity bias. It's just a function of your brain. So just know that. But yeah, I think we give into it too quickly, and there's so much else that could be possible besides the worst case scenario, besides the judgment. And yes, you may get that. You can't control that. But you have to be willing and open to receive all of it, because it's all a part of it.
Gosh, I mean, it's so simple when you explain it like that. And even what you said at the beginning, like you have to be willing to become unpopular. As a recovering people pleaser, um, I've even in this past week noticed situations in my life that I've held on to because I didn't want to disappoint somebody else. And it can feel so scary for those of us who are wired that way to be people pleasers, to know that we're going to disappoint somebody. And
Well, to
yeah, go
assume
ahead.
to assume you're going to disappoint someone.
Good distinction.
Yeah. To
Okay. So to assume that's true, because it's really, I mean,
You don't know yet, because you don't know yet. Right? You're
mhm.
predicting what you think the outcome is going to be. You've already made up your mind that the other person's going to be disappointed.
Yep.
And I mean, they might be, but they also might not be. They might be, inspired by your ability to say no and then learn to do it themselves. Like there's so much else that could be possible. We just don't allow space for something else to show up, if that makes sense.
This is why you're a good coach. It makes total sense.
And I mean, I'm sitting here talking about these things as as a people pleaser, as someone who struggles with these same things, right? It's I don't sit here having figured it all out, but I have the awareness to understand and to see it and to look at it and say, okay, interesting. With curiosity, with compassion, let's learn, and not fall into it as quickly. Just that space to take a breath and notice is 90% of the work.
Oh, that's so okay. This is good. This is like a mini coaching session. I love it. One of the other things that you help people with, which has been a personal struggle of mine, and I think a lot of people listening can probably relate as well, is the fear of taking up space in the world. And you talk about on your website, just imagine being able to release the fear of making other people uncomfortable by taking up space. And that stuck out to me, because I think that's something that can really get in our way of making our voice as loud as it could be, and putting our work out there as boldly as we want to. I would just love to hear, like, first of all, is that something that you struggled with? And if so, how did you get past it? And any words of wisdom that you would have for somebody who's going through that right now?
Yeah. So I have gotten better at it, about it, with it. Does it still show up? Absolutely. So couple thoughts here. The first thing that, again, is just as much as a reminder to myself as it is to whoever's listening, is it's not about you. It's not about you, right? Especially for those of us who want to make an impact, who have such a strong sense of purpose through our work. And it's like by hiding, there are actually people, there are people out there who will only be able to hear what you have to say. And by hiding, you are hurting people. By hiding, you are hurting people. Again, I'm like, Tallia, listen to yourself here.
This is a tweetable moment right now. By hiding, you are hurting people.
Yeah. This is self-advice to myself.
Mm-hmm.
By hiding, you are hurting people. And I do think if you have tendencies to hide, to want to dim your light, to want to, to be afraid of taking up space, where does that come from for you? There's a story there for everybody. That's different for everybody. For me, it's really related to my sister. It's related to not wanting to outshine, because when I did outshine, it created conflict, right? And I because that was my experience, that became my story about the world. So look at it, look at where it comes from, look at where it's rooted, look at where it belongs, and keep it there, right? Don't turn it into something bigger than it needs to be. Um, and and the other thing I'll say there is, you know, again, in looking at my story around this, in case this relates to anybody, and I've shared this before, and a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, yes, I just never had the language to know this is what was going on. But for me, I have come to define myself and define like how I love and care for people by suffering with them.
Hmm.
And so the story for me always became, well, I can't shine, I can't show myself, I can't feel joy or anything I actually want to feel until everybody else feels it first.
Mm. I relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't fully experience joy or happiness until everybody around me feels it first. So what's happening there is almost like, it's like a self-sabotage situation where it's like I'm then constantly looking, because I've become comfortable hiding and waiting. I'm constantly looking for how people are in pain, and there's pain everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it fuels that, it feeds that story, and it gives me more reason to procrastinate and to stay back and to wait, and it's just become comfortable and I'm safe in that space. um, so again, the awareness of that story is huge, because then comes, again, is it true that you can't feel happiness until everybody else feels it first? Is it true? Why does that feel true? What could be true instead? What could your joy and happiness do for somebody else besides make them feel bad about themselves? Right?
Yeah.
And the turning point for me was a conversation I had. I went to a conference with a bunch of other people out in Serenbe called Attune, and Shaman Durek was a speaker, and he pulled me up in front of hundreds of people and like totally did this whole read on me, and was like, you need to remember and realize that you suffering with people, you feeling people's pain, only adds to the suffering.
Hmm.
You're not helping anybody because what you're also doing, and I've seen this play out for myself, is like, I want to fix people's pain. What I'm doing is essentially taking away the opportunity for them to step up for themselves. Like, I'm robbing you of the opportunity to learn and grow and feel. So yeah, so much to unpack there, but and I don't even remember what the initial question was.
Me neither, but this is good. Keep going. I think it was releasing the fear of making other people uncomfortable by taking up space. Yeah.
And how it's the takeaway from that for me was, it's not, I'll meet you in the depths of your pain. It's, I'm going to stay up here. I'm going to stay in the light. I'm going to stay visible. I'm going to stay in this space that actually feels true and good to me, to remind you of where you to remind you of where you two belong. Right. To show you that there's possibility outside of where you're at, because a lot of us, when we get into the depths of that mud, we're so focused on where we are that we don't remember that we can look, it's like, don't just look this way, you can look up, you can look to the side, but we have blinders on a lot of times. So and this is all stuff I'm still working through, but I think ultimately it's, what's the story there, and what could be true instead, and what's the why, like, what for me, when I come back to why I do the work I do, and remember that's the question that I come to remind me that it's not about me, right? Like, this work is needed by people. This work is not about me. And if I come back to that motivation, it can just shift me out of whatever story I'm stuck in sometimes.
Gosh. And there's so much to be said too for letting other people take responsibility of their own feelings, which I think that theme has kind of come up a couple of different times, at least for me, while we've been talking today too, is realizing like, you're not responsible for everybody else's feelings. Like Shaman Durek told you like you suffering with them doesn't help. I remember when you put up that post on Instagram, and first of all, I was so jealous. So I was like, I love shaman Durek. That must have been amazing. But what a cool awareness and takeaway. And then I was so excited for you, because here's the thing, you chose to step up and share that moment. And you could have been like, oh, I don't want to make people uncomfortable that I was on stage with Shaman Durek and yada, yada. But when you shared that, it created an awareness in me of, oh, I do that too.
Yes.
So you being willing to share your transformation and what was on the other side totally inspired me. So I think it's a great example of, we don't even know the people who we're impacting positively when we choose to show up that way.
Yeah. I mean, the number of people who came up to me after he called me up on stage, tears in their eyes, wanting to shake my hand and say thank you for what I taught them. I was like, I didn't do anything. I was just picked out randomly from the crowd. It was a very, but yes, to echo your point, it's like other people, we just become we reflect, we mirror for each other, we teach each other. And it wasn't about me in that moment. It was about, well, I wouldn't even say that. I think it can be about you and everyone else too. It's not either about them or it's about me. It can be about everybody. It can include, and it should include, yourself as well, and that vision you have for the world. And one of the beautiful things I remember reading from The Power of Receiving, can you tell I read a lot of books?
A little bit.
This is why I started a book club. But The Power of Receiving by Amanda Owen, she talks about how when you put yourself to the side, the universe will do the same. Like, okay, you don't want to be included? We're not gonna, okay, cool. I see you, I hear you. So it's about including yourself for your vision for the world. And it's okay to be a part of it too.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That book's going in my Amazon cart right after this interview. I haven't read that, and that sounds incredible.
It's brilliant. You would love it. It's a lot about, learning how to work with your goals and learning to receive instead of constantly be in active states of pushing and forcing and doing and making things happen. Like, let things happen for you. And how to do that is really what she gets into in the book. It's awesome.
I love it. And that actually ties in with the final question I wanted to ask you before we tell people how they can connect with you. So I think a lot of my people are like me. They would consider themselves achievers, some type A, drivers, go-getters. And I have found so many times in my own life that I am taking action just for the sake of taking action, because it was on my to-do list and it seemed like the right thing to put on at the time. And I want to get it done and cross it off and go on to the next thing. And we find ourselves you can find yourself so frantic throughout the day, and you're not stopping to consider, is this actually moving me towards my goal? Or am I just doing this because somebody else told me I should, or I thought I should? The moment. So I know you talk about the difference between action and aligned action. And I would love if you could help us make the distinction.
Yeah.
How do we know what the difference is, and how do we take aligned action instead of just action?
Yeah, that's a great question. Couple ways to answer this. The first, how do we know what the difference is? I'd say, does it come from a place of should, or does it come from a place of must? I'm going to plug another book here.
Do it. I want all the books.
This one is what we're reading in the book club this month. It's called The Crossroads of Should and Must, by Elle Luna. And she's actually joining us for a live interview at the end of the month, which is awesome. So she talks about, the crossroads. Does it come from a should place, which can feel heavy and shallow, or does it come from a must place, which can sometimes be, the voice of must is quiet, it's gentle, it's a whisper, right? Whereas should is very loud, it's in our face. It's, you should. Okay, who's, why, according to who's saying this to me? So that's the first question, right? Is it a should action, or is it a must action? What's the intention behind it? What's the why behind it? And then again, what's the story? What's the story that's tied to being productive for you? For a lot of people, it's, if I'm not pushing, if I'm not working, then fill in the blank, right? Then I'm not moving forward. Okay, is it true that if you're not actively being productive that you're not moving forward in life? Because that's a lot of pressure to always be doing something, right?
Yeah.
So what's the if then statement that's motivating that behavior? And yeah, and I think again, aligned action, when I think of that word aligned action, it's action that's tied to values, right? There's just a stronger sense of not just what you're doing, but who you're being and how those actions are tied to becoming more of the person you want to be. So how is the doing related to your being? And I think, again, a lot of us do for the sake of doing without looking at where our attention and time actually goes and what does this say about me, and yeah, is this what I want? Did I choose this or did I just fall into this?
Wow.
So a couple ways to look at that.
Yeah, that all of that hits home for me. And, it reminds me of something that happened earlier this year. And I'll share this story, and I'll probably alienate some people. It's okay. I think you'll get it, Tallia. But one of my good friends, her sister passed away from cancer, and she and her sister had been very, very close. And she has had communication with her sister since she transitioned. And this is where it's like, I know I'm probably losing some people.
You will not lose.
It's like, I 100% believe in this. And the number one thing that her sister told her from the other side is that there are no shoulds. Yeah. Like, we make all of this up. We create all of these shoulds for ourselves. And she said, Kristen, there are no shoulds. Mm-hmm. And that just like, I think about that. I remember that. I try to remember it as much as I can, because it's just almost ingrained in us that like, I should do this, I should do that to be good, quote unquote good, right? I should take this action, or I should spend my money in this way, or do this that way. And just like realizing that it's all made up is so freaking liberating.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And how the shoulds are usually tied to I should, because if and when I do, then I'll be liked, I'll be popular, I'll be successful according to everybody else.
Yes.
Right. And yeah, I love that. And it's should, must, good, bad, right, wrong. Like, these are all made up constructs that keep us too far from ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have chills. I love this. This just, wow. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for helping me and everyone listening think differently about how we show up and the thoughts and the judgments that we have. And I would love if you could share, we've talked a little bit about your book club, so I want you to share about your book club. I know you've also got other ways that people can work with you more intimately if they want to, and tell us about that, and then how people can connect with you.
Yes. So I run a personal development community that's part community, part resource hub, part book club. Once a month, we pick a topic related to personal development, authenticity, expectation, people pleasing, fear, self-compassion, purpose, and we talk about it throughout the month. Reflection questions, discussions, member meetups, polls that I share in this community. So we just kind of engage in dialogue, start going through our own reflections around these topics. And for those who choose, there's also a book that I pick based on the topic of that month. I provide resources on the book, kind of main takeaways from the book, and then at the end of the month we come together for a live workshop on the topic. And if we get lucky, we've had some beautiful, amazing authors join us for those discussions, to either lead us through an activity or just unpack some of the lessons from the book and from the topic. So that is that community. And we have it's officially international. We're almost at our 100-person mark.
Oh my gosh.
With people from all over the world, which is just so exciting and so fun to see. So information about that, it's a hidden secret page that you're only getting access to because you're listening. But if you head over to talliadeljou.com/special access, you'll see all the information. You'll see a list of my favorite books. And you'll be able to get a month of free access into the community to check it out and see what's there for you. And so that's kind of my fun community resource center book club. And then the primary way I work with people is through a 6-month program called the Inner Work Circle. And that really is like a full-on, every week for 6 months, you're getting a video, a lesson, an inner work practice, a self-reflective practice to work on. So it really is for people who want to deep dive and commit to consistent action and consistent, consistent practice of cultivating a deeper relationship to yourself and your thoughts. And so weekly lessons, monthly group calls, private coaching sessions, and a retreat. So that's kind of my bread and butter. It's so much fun. It's intense. I won't lie. It's a lot of work. And that can be, for some people, the commitment they need to make to really start seeing change in their lives and to start showing up and stop hiding and, retell some stories.
Yeah.
So,
no kidding. And that's the type of stuff that it goes with you your whole life. Once you make those transformations, once you do that deeper inner work, it carries with you your whole life. So it is the deep work, but it's the important work as well. So everything is on your website, right? TalliaDeljou.com.
Yeah. Okay. TalliaDeljou.com/innerworkcircle is where you'll find the details about that program. And podcast, I haven't, in full transparency, have not released an episode in quite some time, just because there are so many things happening and you have to prioritize, and seasons of business change. But I do have a podcast called Sincerely Me, all about personal development, inner work, with some awesome conversations there, about 55 different episodes you all can jump into. So
amazing. Yeah. Recommended highly on Forbes, by the way, which is just throwing that out there.
And I do, as always, want to take a moment to acknowledge the role you played in so much of me building out this vision and this dream and this brand. And it really, it started in your living room. So I have to just acknowledge that and say thank you for everything you've done to get me to where I am, and to see what is possible for this work and to believe in this work. And you've been so instrumental in my process. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, there's just certain messages and certain people that I work with where it's like, oh my gosh, am I actually getting paid to like show up and help be a little bit behind the scenes of bringing this to life? And this work it's so important, what you're doing. And this message, I think today was such like a little sliver of what you teach and how you help people, but I know it got me thinking differently. I'm thinking about like should versus must. I'm thinking about taking aligned action, and that I know that our listeners are too. So thank you so much for your wisdom, for your friendship, for the honor of just getting to know you and learn from you. And you are a beautiful soul and being and light in the world. And I so appreciate you.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you so much for having me and for always being a source of inspiration and encouragement. I appreciate it a lot.